Lose 20 libs or you'll ruin your sister's wedding photos. My mother's voice cut through the living room like a verdict. I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, staring at the pasta on my plate that suddenly felt like evidence of my failure. My name is Eleanor. I'm 33 years old, and I've spent most of my life listening to my family dissect my body like it was public property. My sister Bridget sat across from me, her engagement ring catching the afternoon light streaming through the windows of my parents' home in Charleston, South Carolina. She didn't say anything, but the small smile playing at her lips told me everything. This wasn't news to her. They discussed this before I arrived for Sunday dinner. My father cleared his throat the way he always did when he wanted to add weight to something my mother said. Your mom has a point, Eleanor. This is Bridget's big day. The photos will last forever. I set my fork down slowly, carefully. My heart hammered in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. Years of practice had taught me that reacting only made things worse. Showing hurt was interpreted as weakness. Showing anger meant I was being difficult. I see, I said quietly. Bridget finally spoke, her voice carrying that particular tone of false concern she'd perfected over the years. It's not that you look bad, Ellie. It's just that everything needs to be perfect. You understand, right? I've spent so much money on this wedding. The photographer alone cost $8,000. The $8,000 on someone to document a day where I was already being told I wasn't good enough to be seen as I was. My mother reached across the table and patted my hand. We're not trying to hurt your feelings, sweetheart. We're trying to help you. This could be a great opportunity for you to finally get serious about your health. There it was. The framing that had defined my entire relationship with my family. Every criticism was help. Every judgment was concern. Every moment they made me feel small was actually them caring about me. I nodded slowly, letting them think I was absorbing their wisdom. But something inside me had shifted. The wedding is in 3 months, my mother continued, pulling out her phone. That gives you 12 weeks. 20 is definitely doable if you commit. I found this great program. It's only $300 a month, and they send you all your meals prepackaged. She showed me her phone screen, but I barely glanced at it. My mind was somewhere else entirely, calculating different numbers, 3 months of meal programs, weekly weigh-ins that would inevitably become family events, 90 days of having every bite I took monitored and commented on. I'll think about it, I said, standing up from the table. Where are you going? My mother asked sharply. We haven't had dessert yet. I made that lemon cake you love. The one I love, not the one she'd let me eat without commentary. I need to get going, I said, keeping my voice steady. I have work early tomorrow. That was a lie. I worked remotely as a graphic designer, and my schedule was flexible, but it was an excuse they couldn't argue with. I kissed my mother's cheek, hugged my father briefly, and gave Bridget a tight smile. Congratulations again on the engagement. The drive back to my apartment took 20 minutes, but I barely registered the route. My hands gripped the steering wheel while my mother's words played on repeat. Lose 20 lb or you'll ruin your sister's wedding photos, as if my existence in my current body was an act of sabotage. When I finally walked into my apartment, I stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking at the space I'd created for myself. Plants on every surface, art on the walls, books stacked on shelves, a comfortable couch with throw pillows and colors I loved. This was my sanctuary, the place where I didn't have to be anyone but myself. I pulled out my phone and opened my Notes app. Instead of searching for diet programs, I typed 3 words: I deserve better. Then I sat on my couch, opened my laptop, and started researching something else entirely. Not how to lose 20 lb in 12 weeks, not how to make myself smaller, but how to take up space in a way that would make my own happiness the priority for once in my life. The next morning, I woke up to 17 text messages in the family group chat all about the wedding. My mother had sent a detailed timeline of the next 3 months, color-coded by priority level. Week 1 through 4 were labeled Eleanor's Transformation Phase 1. I stared at my phone screen, feeling the familiar tightness in my chest. I scrolled through the messages while making coffee. Bridget sent photos of bridesmaid dresses, all in a pale pink. My mother responded with heart emojis. My father chimed in occasionally with thumbs-up reactions. Then came the message clearly directed at me. Remember, everyone needs to be at their best for the photos. This day is about making memories that will last forever. I set my phone face down and focused on the simple ritual of making breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, fresh foods I enjoyed, prepared the way I liked them. No measuring, no tracking, no guilt. But my mind kept drifting back through the years, cataloging moments I'd tried to forget. Family gatherings where my mother would intercept me before I reached the buffet table. Beach vacations where Bridget wore bikinis while I received suggestions about flattering one-pieces. Holiday photos where I was consistently positioned behind other family members, easy to crop out if needed. When I was 16, Bridget was 11. I'd already started developing curves while she was still stick-thin. I remembered my mother taking me aside during Bridget's birthday party. "You need to watch what you eat, Eleanor. I don't want you to struggle the way I did." But Bridget never had to watch anything. She ate what she wanted and was celebrated for her naturally slender frame. College had been my escape. 4 years in Savannah, building a life that didn't revolve around my family's constant monitoring. I'd made friends who never commented on my food choices. I dated people who found me attractive as I was. I'd discovered that the world outside my family's house was full of people who didn't consider my body a problem requiring intervention. But every visit home pulled me back into the old dynamics. The comments would start within hours. "Have you tried that new diet? You have such a pretty face. If you just lost a little weight, you'd be perfect." The worst part was how they treated Bridget differently. My younger sister had grown into their ideal. Thin, blonde, conventionally pretty, she worked as a real estate agent, a job my mother constantly praised as perfect for someone with Bridget's looks and charm. And I was the contrast, the before picture, the cautionary tale. I'd tried to talk to Bridget about it once 3 years ago during Christmas. "Do you ever notice how differently they treat us?" I'd asked. She'd looked at me with genuine confusion. "What do you mean?" "The comments about my weight, the way Mom monitors what I eat. You don't get that." She'd laughed. Actually laughed. "Ellie, that's because you're sensitive about it. If you didn't make such a big deal about your weight, they wouldn't have to worry about bringing it up carefully." My phone buzzed again. Another message from my mother. "Eleanor, I forwarded you information about a gym near your apartment. They have a special new member rate. I thought it might help with your goals." My goals. As if losing weight had ever been my goal rather than their demand. I picked up my phone and typed, "Thanks for thinking of me." Neutral, polite, giving them nothing to criticize. But I didn't open the gym information. Instead, I opened my banking app and looked at my savings account. The balance showed 42,000, more than enough for what I was beginning to consider. I spent the rest of the day working on client projects, designing logos and websites for people who cared about my creativity, not my dress size. That evening, I went for a walk through my neighborhood. Charleston in early spring was beautiful. The historic streets lined with blooming alas. Before bed, I opened my laptop again and continued the research I'd started the night before. Wellness retreats, not weight loss camps but actual retreats focused on rest, renewal, and self-care. I found one that made my heart beat faster. Serenity Shores, located on a private island off the coast of North Carolina. 5 days of massage, meditation, yoga, gourmet healthy meals, and complete disconnection from the outside world. They encouraged guests to leave their phones behind. The dates available included the weekend of Bridget's wedding. The cost was $4,700 for the 5-day package. I sat back in my chair, my cursor hovering over the booking page. This was crazy. Missing my sister's wedding, spending that much money on myself, choosing my own peace over family obligation. But as I thought about walking down that aisle, knowing everyone would be judging my body, knowing the photographer had been instructed to hide me in the photos, knowing I'd spend the entire day feeling like an embarrassment to be managed, something crystallized. I clicked the booking button and entered my credit card information. My hands didn't shake. For the first time in days, I felt completely calm. The confirmation email arrived within minutes. Serenity Shores, the exact dates of Bridget's wedding weekend. Non-refundable. I saved the confirmation, closed the screen, and went to bed. I'd tell them eventually, but not yet. For now, this choice was mine alone, a secret that made me smile in the darkness. The next 8 weeks passed in a strange dual existence. On the surface, I played along with my family's expectations. I responded to my mother's texts about weight loss programs with non-committal responses like, "I'm working on it and I'll keep that in mind." I attended the bridesmaid dress fitting, and said nothing when the seamstress took my measurements while my mother hovered nearby, her lips pressed into a thin line. But privately I was preparing for something entirely different. I threw myself into my work, taking on extra projects. The additional income wasn't necessary for the retreat, which was already paid for, but staying busy kept me from second-guessing my decision. I designed websites for a bakery, a yoga studio, and a nonprofit focused on body positivity. That last project felt particularly meaningful. My apartment became my sanctuary in a way it never had before. I stopped accepting every invitation to my parents' house for Sunday dinner, claiming work deadlines. The less time I spent with them, the clearer I could see the patterns I'd been trapped in. Bridget called me one evening, 6 weeks before the wedding. "I'm sending you the final timeline for the wedding day. Hair and makeup start at 700 m, so you'll need to be at mom and dad's by 60:30. Okay, I said neutrally. Mom said you've been doing really well with the weight loss. Bridget continued. She's so proud of you for taking it seriously. I hadn't lost a single pound, hadn't tried to, hadn't changed anything about how I ate or existed in my body, but my mother had clearly decided to tell Bridget what she wanted to hear. That's nice, I replied. I really appreciate it, Bridget said. I know I can be a little intense about the wedding planning, but it's just because I want everything to be perfect. Sure, I said, because what else was there to say? After we hung up, I sat on my couch and thought about the wedding day timeline. 6:30 m to start getting ready, photos all day, ceremony at 4 p.m, reception until 11 p.m, 16.5 hours of performing the role of the good sister who'd successfully shrunk herself into acceptability. Instead, I'd be checking into Serenity Shores at noon, being handed herbal tea and a welcome packet. The contrast made me laugh out loud. 4 weeks before the wedding, my mother hosted a bridesmaids' luncheon at her country club. I attended wearing a simple dress and endured 2 hours of wedding talk while picking at an overpriced salad. The other bridesmaids were Bridget's friends from college and work, women I barely knew. They all looked similar to Bridget, slender and polished. They discussed workout routines and juice cleanses, shared tips about photographers and makeup artists. I smiled and nodded and said very little. At one point, my mother leaned close and whispered, "You're doing so well, sweetheart. I can tell you've lost weight. Your face looks thinner." My face looked exactly the same, but my mother saw what she wanted to see. Thanks, I said, sipping my water. 3 weeks before the wedding, Bridget sent a message to the bridesmaids group chat. Remember, we're all representing me in these photos, so please make sure you're looking your absolute best. And please, no one gain any weight between now and the wedding. The dresses were fitted specifically for each of you. I stared at that message for a long time. No one gained any weight, as if our bodies were decorations she'd arranged for her special day. The other bridesmaids responded with laughing emojis and reassurances. I sent nothing. 1 week before the wedding, my mother called. "Eleanor, I need you to come by this Sunday. We're having a final fitting for the dresses." "I can't this Sunday," I said. "I have a work deadline." "This is more important than work," my mother said sharply. "This is your sister's wedding." "The dress fit fine at the last fitting," I said. "I'm sure it's still fine." There was a long pause. "Have you been following the program we discussed? You sound defensive." "I'm not defensive. I'm just busy." Another pause. "Eleanor, if you've gained weight, we need to know now so adjustments can be made." I closed my eyes. "The dress fits. I'll see you at the wedding." I hung up before she could respond. That night, I pulled up the confirmation email from Serenity Shores and read through the details again. Check-in was noon on Friday. The wedding ceremony was Saturday at 4 p.m. I'd be unreachable on a private island, my phone locked away, my only responsibility to breathe and exist. I also drafted an email to send to my family on Friday morning. "I won't be attending the wedding. I've made other plans. I wish you all a beautiful day." No explanation, no justification, no apology. I saved it as a draft and felt a weight lift. 3 days before the wedding, Bridget sent individual texts to all the bridesmaids with specific instructions. Mine included. "So glad you took Mom's advice seriously. You're going to look great in the photos." I didn't respond. The night before I left for Serenity Shores, I packed a small bag, comfortable clothes, a book, a journal. I set an alarm for 6:30 m, planning to be on the road before any family members might drop by. I also finalized the email and scheduled it to send at 8:00 a.m. Friday morning after I'd be well on my way. As I lay in bed that night, I felt no anxiety, no guilt, no second thoughts, just a deep, peaceful certainty that I was finally putting myself first. Tomorrow my family would expect me to show up and play my role. Instead, I'd be choosing myself. And whatever consequences came from that choice, I was ready because I deserved better than spending my sister's wedding day feeling like an apology in human form. I deserved peace, respect, and the freedom to exist in my body without shame, and I was about to claim exactly that. Friday morning arrived with sunshine streaming through my bedroom window. I woke before my alarm, feeling a clarity I hadn't experienced in months. While my family still slept, believing I'd be showing up for final wedding preparations tomorrow, I loaded my car and drove out of Charleston. The coastal highway stretched before me, and with each mile, I felt lighter. I stopped for coffee at a small cafe 2 hours into the drive, and when the barista handed me a blueberry muffin I'd ordered without a second thought, I realized I hadn't calculated calories or felt guilty in weeks. My phone stayed silent until exactly 8 a.m., then it exploded. I was crossing a bridge when the first call came through, my mother. I let it go to voicemail. 30 seconds later, she called again, then Bridget, then my father. The calls came in a relentless pattern while I drove, my phone buzzing constantly. I knew the scheduled email had sent. I imagined my mother checking her inbox over morning coffee, expecting confirmations, instead finding my simple declaration of absence. I pictured Bridget's face, the immediate family meeting, the frantic calls. A text from my mother lit up my screen. "This is not funny. Call me immediately." Then Bridget, "Are you serious right now? Today? You're doing this today?" My father's message was shorter. "Very disappointed, call your mother." I turned my phone to silent and kept driving. The text continued, piling up unread. I caught glimpses at red lights. Words like selfish and ungrateful and ruining everything scrolled past. Bridget sent 14 messages in 10 minutes. A progression from anger to bargaining to threats. An hour from my destination. I pulled over at a rest stop. I sat in my car and finally read through the messages. My mother had sent paragraphs, long texts about family obligations and disappointment, and how much money had been spent. She invoked every favor she'd ever done for me, every sacrifice, every reason I owed them my presence. "After everything we've done for you," one text read, "after raising you, supporting you, paying for your education, this is how you repay us, by abandoning your sister on the most important day of her life." Bridget's messages were more direct in their cruelty. "I knew you were jealous, but I didn't think you'd actually sabotage my wedding. This is beyond petty. This is pathetic." Another mom said, "You've been lying about losing weight. I defended you. But you did, didn't you? You never tried, you never cared." And another, "You're not just hurting me, you're hurting the whole family. Everyone will ask where you are." What am I supposed to tell them? That my sister is so selfish she couldn't be bothered to show up. My father's messages were cold and formal. "Your mother is very upset. We need to discuss this immediately. This behavior is unacceptable and will have consequences." I sat there reading their words, waiting for the guilt to crush me, waiting for the familiar spiral of shame and the desperate urge to fix things. But the guilt didn't come. Instead, I felt a strange sort of calm because everything they'd written proved exactly why I'd needed to leave. Not one message asked if I was okay. Not one person questioned why I might have made this choice. Every word was about their disappointment, their inconvenience, their feelings. I typed out a single response. "I'm safe. I'm taking care of myself. Please enjoy the wedding." Then I turned off my phone completely and got back on the road. The last hour took me through small coastal towns and finally onto a private causeway. Serenity Shores sat on a barrier island, accessible only by appointment. At the gatehouse, I gave my name and watched the guard check his list before waving me through. The retreat center appeared through the palm trees like something from a dream. White buildings with blue shutters connected by crushed shell pathways, gardens full of native plants, the sound of waves in the distance. I parked and walked to the main building, my bag over my shoulder. The lobby was cool and quiet, decorated in soft blues and greens with large windows overlooking the ocean. A woman about my age approached with a genuine smile. "Eleanor." "Yes," I said. "Welcome to Serenity Shores, I'm Jennifer. We're so glad you're here." She didn't comment on my body. Didn't suggest I'd made the right choice by coming here to work on myself. Didn't frame this as a weight loss opportunity. She just welcomed me as I was. Jennifer handed me a folder with my schedule. Morning yoga, meditation sessions, massage appointments, healthy meals, free time to walk the beach, read, or simply exist without obligation. "We ask that you turn in your phone and any other devices," Jennifer explained. "We find that complete disconnection allows for deeper relaxation. You'll get everything back when you check out on Tuesday." I handed over my phone without hesitation. She locked it in a small safe and gave me a key. "Whenever you're ready to reconnect," but I wasn't ready. I might never be ready. Jennifer walked me to my cottage, a small building with a private porch facing the ocean. Inside was a comfortable bed, a bathroom with a deep tub, and a sitting area with books and art supplies. "Lunch is served at 100 p.m., Jennifer said, "but if you'd prefer something lighter now, I can have tea and fruit brought to your cottage." "That would be wonderful," I said. After she left, I stood on the porch and looked out at the Atlantic Ocean. Somewhere several hours south, my family was spiraling. Bridget was probably crying. My mother was probably calling every family member to complain. My father was probably calculating how to spin my absence. And I was here breathing salt air, feeling the sun on my face, existing in my body without apology. A staff member arrived with a tray containing herbal tea and fresh fruit. I sat on the porch, ate slowly, and felt something I hadn't felt in my family's presence in years. Peace. Tomorrow, while Bridget walked down the aisle, I'd be in a yoga class. While the photographer arranged the bridal party, I'd be getting a massage. While my family sat down to reception dinner, I'd be watching the sunset from the beach. And for the first time in my life, I wouldn't be shrinking myself to make room for someone else's vision of who I should be. The afternoon passed in a gentle blur. I unpacked my few belongings, took a long bath in the deep tub, and wrapped myself in the plush robe provided. At 100 p.m., I walked to the dining pavilion for lunch. The space was open air with a thatched roof, ceiling fans circulating the ocean breeze. About a dozen other guests sat at various tables, some alone with books, others in quiet conversation. The atmosphere was peaceful, contemplative. Lunch was grilled fish, quinoa salad, roasted vegetables, and fresh fruit. The food was beautifully prepared and served on handmade pottery. I ate slowly, tasting every bite, feeling grateful for nourishment without judgment. A woman at the next table caught my eye and smiled. "First time here?" "Yes," I said, "you third visit. I come every year for my birthday. It's my gift to myself." She was probably in her 50s with silver hair and kind eyes. Best decision I ever made, learning to prioritize my own peace. We chatted for a few minutes. She didn't ask what brought me here, and I appreciated that. Everyone at Serenity Shores had their own reasons for seeking refuge, and those reasons were private. After lunch, I attended an afternoon meditation session in one of the garden pavilions. The instructor guided us through breathing exercises and body awareness practices. At one point, she said something that struck me deeply. "Your body is not a problem to solve. It's a home to inhabit with kindness." I felt tears slip down my cheeks, unexpected and relieving. The evening brought dinner in the same peaceful pavilion, followed by an optional sunset walk on the beach. I joined a small group, all of us quiet as we strolled along the shore. The sun painted the sky in oranges and pinks, and the rhythm of the waves seemed to sync with my heartbeat. Back at my cottage, I found the bed turned down and a small lavender sachet on my pillow. I slept deeply that night, the kind of sleep that comes from complete safety. Saturday morning, the day of Bridget's wedding, I woke naturally without an alarm. The sunrise filled my cottage with soft golden light. I lay in bed for a long time, thinking about what was happening back in Charleston. Right now, my mother would be frantic. The house would be full of hairstylists and makeup artists and nervous energy. Bridget would be in her room, probably crying over my absence, her perfect day already marred. My empty seat would be glaringly obvious. The bridal party photos would have an asymmetrical gap. Every family member would be whispering, speculating, judging, and I felt no urge to save them from that discomfort. I got up and dressed in comfortable clothes, then walked to the morning yoga class. The session was held on a deck overlooking the ocean, the sound of waves providing a natural soundtrack. For 90 minutes I moved through poses that made my body feel strong and capable. The instructor offered modifications without judgment, encouraging us to honor our body's needs. After yoga came breakfast, fresh smoothies, perfectly ripe fruit, yogurt with local honey, homemade granola. I sat alone at a table with an ocean view and ate every bite without once thinking about calories. At 10:00 a.m. back in Charleston, the photographer would be arriving. The stage getting ready photos would begin. Someone would be explaining my absence to confused relatives. My mother would probably be composing a cover story. At 11:00 a.m., I had a massage appointment. The therapist worked in a small building surrounded by gardens. She used warm oil scented with eucalyptus and lavender, working tension from my shoulders and back. "You're holding a lot of stress here," she murmured, working a knot between my shoulder blades. "Whatever you're worried about, try to let it go just for now." I closed my eyes and released everything. Bridget's disappointment. My mother's anger. My father's cold disapproval. The family members who would judge me as selfish, difficult, the problem child who'd finally proven them right. Let them think what they wanted. Let them tell whatever story made them feel better. I was here in this moment, breathing and existing and finally choosing myself. At noon I ate lunch on my cottage porch. A staff member had delivered a beautiful meal, and I sat watching the ocean while eating fresh salad and grilled shrimp. Back in Charleston, the wedding party would be gathering for pre-ceremony photos. Bridget would be in her dress surrounded by her friends, all of them perfectly styled. The photographer would be arranging them in flattering configurations. At 2 p.m., I walked down to the beach and found a comfortable chair under an umbrella. I read my book, occasionally looking up to watch the waves or the birds. The ceremony would start in 2 hours. Guests would be arriving at the venue, a historic plantation house my parents had rented. People would be asking about me. "Where's Eleanor? Is she sick? What happened?" And what would they say? That I'd abandoned my sister, that I'd proven myself to be exactly the selfish person they'd always suspected, that this was typical Eleanor behavior, dramatic and attention-seeking. At 4:00 p.m., I was scheduled for an aromatherapy session. While Bridget walked down the aisle in Charleston, I lay on a massage table while the therapist applied essential oils and guided me through deep relaxation. Notice where you're holding tension, she said softly, and breathe into those spaces. Give yourself permission to release what no longer serves you. I breathed in lavender and eucalyptus. I released 33 years of trying to earn love by shrinking myself. I released the belief that my worth was determined by my dress size. I released the exhausting performance of being the acceptable daughter, the manageable sister. At 5:00 p.m., the ceremony would be over. Bridget would be married, photos would be taken, and the cocktail hour would begin. My absence would be the subject of hushed conversations. Some people would defend me, saying there must be a good reason. Most would accept whatever story my mother had crafted. I emerged from the aromatherapy session feeling lighter than air. I walked back to my cottage, changed into a sundress, and headed to the dining pavilion for dinner. The evening meal was a celebration of fresh local ingredients. Seafood caught that morning, vegetables from nearby farms, bread baked on site. I sat with the woman I'd met at lunch and another guest, a man about my father's age who'd come to the retreat after a heart attack. Life's too short to spend it being miserable, he said, raising his glass of sparkling water. Took me 58 years to figure that out, but better late than never. We toasted to second chances and new beginnings. At 8:00 p.m. the reception would be in full swing. Dancing, toasts, the cutting of the cake. My empty seat at the family table would be a reminder, a gap in the perfect tableau. But I was here finishing a perfect meal, watching the sun set over the ocean, surrounded by people who'd chosen peace over obligation. After dinner, I walked the beach alone. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the water. I walked for over an hour, feeling utterly free. Sunday morning arrived with the gentle sound of waves and bird song. I woke slowly, stretching in the comfortable bed, feeling rested in a way I hadn't experienced in years. No alarm, no obligations, no performance required. I knew my phone was still locked in the safe, filling up with messages I wasn't ready to read. The wedding was over. The reception had concluded. My family had made it through the day without me, and I'd survived my own rebellion. After morning yoga and a breakfast of fresh fruit and oat porridge, I spent the late morning walking the grounds. The retreat covered about 20 acres with carefully maintained gardens, meditation spaces, and quiet corners designed for reflection. I found a bench overlooking the ocean, and sat for a long time thinking about everything that had led me to this moment, not just the past few months, but the entirety of my relationship with my parents and Bridget. The patterns had been there from the beginning. I'd just been too close to see them clearly. My mother's love had always been conditional. I'd spent my childhood trying to earn it by being good, being obedient, being whatever version of myself she found acceptable. But the bar kept moving. The standards kept changing. Nothing I did was ever quite enough. And Bridget had learned from our parents that she was the favored child. That belief had shaped her into someone who expected accommodation, who saw my needs as secondary to her desires, who genuinely believed she deserved perfect circumstances, even if those circumstances required me to feel inadequate. I'd tried to talk to them. 3 months ago, after that first dinner, I'd attempted to express how hurtful their comments were. I'd called my mother the following Tuesday. "Mom, I need to talk to you about what you said at dinner. About the weight. Honey, I was just trying to help." It didn't feel like help, it felt cruel. There had been a long pause. Then Eleanor, if you're going to be this sensitive about constructive feedback, I don't know how to talk to you. I'm your mother. I want what's best for you. What's best for me is being accepted as I am. But you're not at your best right now. You could be healthier, happier, more confident if you just made some changes. I am happy. I'm confident in my work, in my friendships, in my life. The only place I feel inadequate is around you. Another pause, colder. Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I can't apologize for caring about your well-being. And frankly, I think you're being overdramatic. That conversation had ended with my mother pivoting to wedding logistics, effectively closing the door on any real discussion. I'd tried with Bridget too, sending her a carefully worded text about feeling excluded and judged. Her response had been dismissive. "Ellie, no one is judging you. We just want you to feel your best for the photos. Why are you making this into a big thing, when the people who should love you most refuse to hear your pain? What choice do you have but to stop expecting them to change?" I'd spent years trying to explain myself, justify my feelings, make them understand, but understanding required willingness, and they'd never been willing to see me as anything other than a problem requiring correction. That realization, sitting on a bench overlooking the Atlantic, finally released me from the obligation to keep trying. Monday brought another day of peaceful routine. Morning yoga, meditation, massage, meals prepared with care. I joined a workshop on mindful movement and another on self-compassion. I read 3 chapters of my book. I napped in a hammock. I watched the sunset, and I didn't think about my family once. Tuesday morning, my last at Serenity Shores, I woke with mixed emotions. I'd loved every moment here, but I also knew I couldn't hide on this island forever. Eventually, I'd have to return to Charleston, to my apartment, to my regular life. And that life included a family who would be furious with me. After a final yoga class and breakfast, I packed my belongings and walked to the main building. Jennifer was at the front desk, smiling as I approached. "How was your stay?" she asked. "Transformative," I said honestly. She retrieved my phone from the safe and handed it over. "Whatever is waiting for you on there, remember that you get to choose how you respond. You always have a choice." I thanked her and walked to my car. For a long moment, I sat in the driver's seat without turning on my phone, looking back at the retreat center through the palm trees. This place had given me space to remember who I was outside my family's expectations. I needed to hold on to that truth. Finally, I powered on my phone. It took several minutes for all the notifications to load. Hundreds of them, missed calls, voicemails, text messages, emails. The sheer volume was almost comical. I scrolled through the texts first, starting from Saturday. The messages from my mother were increasingly frantic throughout the wedding day. By evening, they'd turned angry. By Sunday morning, she'd moved into guilt-tripping, sending long messages about how I'd humiliated the family and destroyed Bridget's special day. Bridget's messages followed a similar pattern. Anger, then desperation, then icy rage. Her Sunday night text read, "I will never forgive you for this. You're dead to me." My father had sent 3 texts total, each one a variation on, "Call your mother." There were also messages from my aunt, 2 cousins, and a few family friends, all asking if I was okay or where I'd gone. Those messages at least seemed concerned about my well-being rather than just angry. The voicemails were more of the same. I deleted them without listening after the first 2. Then I opened my email and found something unexpected. A message from Bridget sent Sunday afternoon with the subject line, "Since you ask." I clicked it open and found a single photograph attached. It was the formal bridal party photo taken after the ceremony. Bridget stood in the center in her wedding dress, surrounded by 4 bridesmaids in their pale pink dresses. They were arranged on the steps of the plantation house, perfectly posed and smiling. And there, on the end, obviously edited in, was me, or rather a version of me. Someone had photoshopped my face onto another bridesmaid's body, creating a thinner version of Eleanor, who matched Bridget's aesthetic requirements. The editing was decent, but not perfect. My face didn't quite match the body's proportions, and the lighting was slightly off. Bridget's email contained one sentence. "This is what we had to do because of you." I stared at that photograph for a long time. This was what they'd wanted all along. Not me as I actually existed, but a manipulated version that fit their vision. They'd been trying to Photoshop me in real life, and when I'd refused to participate, they'd just done it digitally instead. I saved the photo to my phone, not as something to be hurt by, but as a reminder. This was what I'd escaped. This was what I'd refused to become. I started the car and began the drive back to Charleston. My mind clear and my decision made. I wouldn't be apologizing. I wouldn't be explaining. I wouldn't be accepting their narrative about my selfishness and cruelty. I'd chosen myself and I'd do it again. The drive back to Charleston took 4 hours, but I stopped halfway at a coffee shop in a small coastal town. I needed to prepare myself for what came next, and I needed caffeine. I sat in my car and finally listened to one of my mother's voicemails, the one left Sunday morning. Her voice was tight with controlled fury. "Eleanor, I don't know what you think you're accomplishing with this stunt, but you've hurt your sister deeply. The wedding was beautiful despite your absence, though we had to field questions all day. I told people you had a work emergency. You're welcome for covering for your selfishness. When you decide to stop this childish behavior, you can call me. Maybe I'll answer." I deleted it and listened to another. This one from Bridget left Saturday night. "I hope you're happy. You got exactly what you wanted, which was to ruin my wedding and make it all about you. Everyone was talking about you instead of celebrating me. You're a terrible sister." I deleted that one too. Then I opened my contacts and scrolled to my Aunt Diane's name. She was my mother's younger sister, someone I'd always felt more comfortable with. Her text from Sunday had simply said, "Are you okay? Call me when you can." I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. "Eleanor. Hi Aunt Diane. Are you all right? Your mother said you disappeared and wouldn't answer your phone." "I'm fine. I was at a wellness retreat. I turned my phone off for a few days." There was a pause. The weekend of Bridget's wedding. Yes, another pause. Longer this time. "Do you want to talk about it?" And suddenly I did. Sitting in that parking lot, I told her everything. The demand that I lose 20 LB, the comments about ruining the photos, Bridget's instruction to the photographer to hide me, the constant monitoring and judgment, and the way my body had been treated as a problem to solve. Diane listened without interrupting. When I finished, she sighed deeply. "I'm not surprised," she said. "Your mother has always been difficult about weight and appearance. She was the same way with me when we were younger. I was heavier than her, and she never let me forget it. I didn't know that. She's mellowed with age, believe it or not. But she still got some of those old attitudes, and she passed them on to Bridget. I noticed it at the wedding, actually. The way Bridget kept making little comments about the food, about people's dresses. She's become just like your mother." I closed my eyes. They photoshopped me into the bridal party photo. A thinner version of me, Jesus. Diane breathed. "Eleanor, that's twisted. I know. What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet, but I'm not apologizing. I'm not pretending I was wrong to choose myself." "Good," Diane said firmly. "You weren't wrong. What they did was cruel and you had every right to protect yourself." We talked for another 20 minutes. Diane told me that the wedding had been tense, that my mother had been visibly angry all day, that Bridget had cried through most of the reception. Several family members had privately expressed concern about my absence. "Your cousin Julia asked me if you were sick," Diane said. "She said it wasn't like you to just not show up. I told her I'd check on you. Tell her I'm fine. Tell anyone who asked that I'm fine and that I made the choice I needed to make." After we hung up, I felt more grounded. At least one person in my family understood. I drove the rest of the way to Charleston and arrived at my apartment in the late afternoon. Walking through my door felt like coming home to myself, my space, my things, my life that existed completely separate from my family's drama. I unpacked, showered, and made myself dinner. Real dinner, not diet food, just a meal I wanted to eat. Then I sat on my couch with my laptop and opened social media. Bridget had posted wedding photos, of course. Her Instagram was a curated gallery of the perfect day. Beautiful dress, handsome groom, stunning venue, golden hour lighting. The bridal party photo she'd posted was the edited one with photoshopped Eleanor smiling on the end of the line. I screenshot it and saved it to a folder. Then I drafted a post of my own. I didn't publish it yet, but I wrote it out. "This is me at a wellness retreat where I spent my sister's wedding weekend. I wasn't invited to leave. I chose to. After being told I needed to lose 20 pounds or I'd ruin the wedding photos, I decided my peace was worth more than performing for people who see my body as a problem. This weekend, I chose myself and I'd do it again." I attached a photo from Serenity Shores, one of me on the beach at sunset, smiling genuinely. The staff photographer had taken it on my second day and it captured something I rarely saw in photos of myself. Pure unfiltered happiness. I saved the draft and closed my laptop. I'd decide later whether to post it, but writing it out felt powerful, claiming my narrative before they could cement theirs. That night, I slept peacefully in my own bed, completely unbothered by the messages still piling up on my phone. Wednesday morning, I woke to find my mother had called 4 times before 8:15 a.m. I let them all go to voicemail and made myself breakfast instead. Around 9, she called again. This time I answered Eleanor. Her voice was ice. "Hi, Mom. I think it's time we had a conversation about your behavior this past weekend." "Okay," I said calmly. "Bridget is devastated. She spent months planning that wedding and you couldn't be bothered to show up. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" "What did you tell them?" "I told them you had a family emergency. I lied to protect you." "You're welcome." I took a sip of my coffee. "I didn't ask you to lie for me." "What was I supposed to say?" "That you threw a tantrum because we hurt your feelings." "You could have told them the truth, that you demanded I lose 20 alab to be in the wedding photos and I chose not to participate." "Silence then. That's not what happened. We suggested you might be more comfortable if you made some healthy changes. We were trying to help you. You told me I'd ruin the photos if I didn't lose weight." "Those were your exact words." "You're twisting things, Eleanor. You always do this. Make yourself the victim when people are just trying to support you." I felt the old pattern trying to reassert itself. The gaslighting, the revision of history. But I'd had 5 days of clarity, and I could see it now for what it was. "Mom, I'm not going to argue about what happened. I know what was said. I know how it made me feel. And I chose to protect myself rather than spend Bridget's wedding feeling terrible." "Protect yourself from your own family. That's ridiculous. Is it? You photoshopped me into the bridal party photo. A thinner version of me because even in my absence, you couldn't accept me as I actually am." Another silence. Bridget needed a complete bridal party for the photos. It was important to her. Then she should have accepted the bridal party she actually had, not the edited version she wished for. "I don't know who you think you are talking to me like this. I'm someone who deserves respect, even from her own mother." My mother's voice went cold. If you want respect, you need to act respectably. What you did was selfish and cruel, and until you apologize to your sister, I don't think we have anything else to discuss. I'm not apologizing. I didn't do anything wrong. Then I guess we're done here." She hung up. I set my phone down and realized my hands were shaking, but not from fear or doubt, from the sheer energy of finally standing my ground. An hour later, Bridget called. I almost didn't answer, but I knew we'd have to have this conversation eventually. "Hi, Bridget." "Don't hi, Bridget me. Do you have any idea what you put me through? I imagine it was difficult having your wedding day not go exactly as planned." "Difficult? It was a nightmare. Everyone was asking about you. The photos look weird with the uneven number. Mom had to make up a story. I'm sorry your photos didn't turn out the way you wanted." "That's it. That's your apology." "I'm not apologizing for missing the wedding. I'm sympathizing that you're disappointed. You're unbelievable. This was the most important day of my life and you ruined it because you couldn't handle some constructive feedback." "It wasn't constructive feedback, Bridget. It was a demand that I change my body to meet your aesthetic standards, and I chose not to do that. So, you punished me for it on my wedding day." "I didn't punish you. I chose myself. There's a difference." "No, there isn't. You knew what missing the wedding would do. You knew it would hurt me. You did it anyway." I took a deep breath. "Bridget, I spent 5 days at a wellness retreat taking care of my mental health. I spent the weekend learning to respect my body. I'm sorry that my choice felt like an attack on you, but that says more about your expectations than my intentions." "My expectations? I expected my sister to show up. That's a pretty basic expectation. You expected me to show up after telling me I needed to lose weight or I'd ruin your photos. After instructing the photographer to hide me, after treating my body like a problem you had to manage. I never said you'd ruin the photos. Mom did. And you agreed with her. You sent me gym recommendations and diet plans. You made it clear my body wasn't acceptable to you because I care about you. If you cared about me, you would have defended me when Mom said those things. You would have told her it was cruel, but you didn't because you agreed with her." Bridget was crying now. "You're my sister. You were supposed to be there. I'm your sister and you were supposed to love me as I am. We both had expectations. We both were disappointed." She hung up without another word. I sat in my apartment feeling emotionally exhausted, but oddly lighter. These conversations needed to happen. My family wanted contrition, a return to the status quo, where I absorbed their criticism. I was offering something else entirely. Boundaries, self-respect, and the truth. That afternoon, my cousin Julia called. "I heard you went to a spa retreat instead of the wedding. News travels fast. Aunt Beverly is telling everyone you had a breakdown. I wanted to hear your version." I told her, not all the details, but enough. Julia listened and then said quietly, "That's messed up, Eleanor. I'm sorry they did that to you." That evening I made my decision. I published the post I drafted. The photo of me at the beach with the caption about choosing myself. Within an hour, the comments started coming in, friends offering support, strangers sharing similar stories, and then family members saw it. My phone exploded with new messages. But this time I was ready. The post went viral in a way I never expected. By Thursday morning, it had been shared thousands of times with comments ranging from supportive to curious to outraged. People were messaging me asking for the full story. My mother called at 7 a.m., her voice shaking with rage. "Take that post down immediately." "No, Eleanor, you're humiliating the entire family." People are messaging me asking what happened. This is completely inappropriate. What's inappropriate is demanding someone lose weight to be in wedding photos, and then photoshopping them when they refuse. You're making us sound like monsters. We were trying to help you. Then you should have no problem with me sharing what happened. If your intentions were good, why are you ashamed of people knowing? She had no answer to that. Bridget was more direct. Her text read, "Delete that post or I'm blocking you from my life forever." I responded, "I'm sorry you're upset, but I'm not taking it down. This is my truth and I have a right to share it." She blocked me anyway. But not all the family reactions were negative. My Aunt Diane commented publicly, "Proud of you for choosing yourself. You look radiant in this photo." Several cousins liked her comment and added their own support. And then something unexpected happened. Other family members started sharing their own stories. My cousin Maya posted about being criticized for gaining weight after her pregnancy. Julia shared about being compared unfavorably to her thinner sister at family gatherings. The pattern was bigger than just me and Bridget and my mother. It was generational, systemic, a legacy of criticism passed down and normalized. By Friday, my inbox was full of interview requests. A writer for a women's health website wanted to talk about body autonomy at family events. A blogger focusing on wedding culture wanted my perspective on bridal party expectations. A podcaster covering family dynamics wanted to discuss boundary setting. I accepted 3 of the interviews, carefully controlling my narrative while protecting specific details that would identify my family. I talked about the general experience of being told to change your body for someone else's aesthetic preferences. I discussed the difference between supporting health and demanding conformity to beauty standards. I shared how choosing myself had been the healthiest thing I'd ever done. The articles came out over the following week, each one generating more discussion. My story resonated with thousands of people who'd experienced similar pressure, and through it all, my family remained furious. My mother sent increasingly hostile messages. Bridget's friends left nasty comments before I blocked them. My father tried the rational approach, explaining calmly why I was wrong and damaging, but I also received messages of support. Aunt Diane invited me to dinner, just the 2 of us, where she shared her own stories of my mother's criticism. Julia started posting her own boundaries content, publicly aligning herself with my stance. Several family friends reached out privately to say they'd always thought the treatment of me was unfair. The tide was turning. Not everyone was on my side, but enough people were that my family's narrative couldn't maintain its dominance. 3 weeks after the wedding, I received a letter in the mail, actual snail mail, which seemed almost comically formal. It was from Bridget, 3 pages of careful handwriting. She didn't apologize. Instead, she explained in detail how I'd hurt her, how my absence had cast a shadow over her entire day, how she'd never be able to look at her wedding photos without thinking about my betrayal. And then in the final paragraph, I thought we were close. I thought you loved me. Sisters are supposed to support each other, but you chose a spa day over being there for me. I don't think I can forgive that. Maybe someday, but not now. I read the letter twice and then I put it in a drawer. Maybe someday we'd find a way to rebuild. But that day wasn't today. Instead, I focused on my work. I took on a major project, redesigning a website for a body-positive fitness studio, pouring my energy into creating something beautiful that celebrated all bodies. The owner became a friend. I went back to Serenity Shores for a long weekend 2 months later, and this time it felt like visiting a sacred space that had changed my life. I started a small online community for people navigating family boundary setting, and it grew quickly. People shared their stories, offered support, and reminded each other that choosing yourself isn't selfish. And slowly, my life transformed. A life where my worth wasn't determined by my family's approval. A life where my body was mine to inhabit without shame. A life where peace mattered more than performance. 6 months after the wedding, I was offered a speaking opportunity at a conference on body autonomy and family dynamics. Standing on that stage sharing my story with 300 people, I realized how far I'd come. I'd lost something that year. But it wasn't weight. It was the belief that I needed to shrink myself to be loved. It was the performance of compliance and the exhausting work of trying to earn acceptance from people who'd made their approval conditional. What I'd gained was infinitely more valuable. My self-respect, my peace, and the absolute certainty that I deserved better. My mother and Bridget faced their own consequences. My mother's reputation in the family took a hit as more relatives came forward with their own stories of her criticism. Bridget's social circle gradually learned the truth about my absence, and several of her friends privately reached out to say they understood my choice. My father remained stubbornly silent, but his silence spoke volumes about his complicity. They'd wanted a perfect wedding day with perfect photos and a perfectly compliant family member. Instead, they got a wedding shadowed by my absence and a permanent reminder that control has its limits. People can only be pushed so far before they choose themselves, and no amount of guilt or manipulation can undo that choice once it's made. Looking back, I understand now that my revenge wasn't in the moment I left for Serenity Shores, though that choice was powerful. My revenge was in building a life so full of peace and self-love that their approval became irrelevant. My revenge was in refusing to be small, in taking up space, in living loudly and unapologetically in the body they'd told me to hide. The ocean breeze at Serenity Shores had whispered a truth I'd been afraid to hear my whole life. I was enough, exactly as I was. And once I truly believed that, nothing they said or did could touch me. That was the greatest revenge of all.